Hilche Sha'ar Avos Hatumos Perik Shnei Moser. Achas Esri Miles Osu Chachamim LaKedesh Al Truma. This is in the Rabbanon. The Midrabanon, there are 11 miles and Legabi Kodesh that Chacham were machmer as opposed to Truma of Elohim. Now yesh la'odam lahadvil kelim b'teich kelim l'truma, avolei l'kedesh. Now a person has a keli, and that keli is Torah. Now he puts into that large keli other kelim, and then he immerses the large keli into the mikveh. Memela, that large keli becomes filled with water of the mikveh, and he wants through that to be toivel the small kelim which are in the large kelim. Now, as long as the large keli has a opening which is the size of a shveferes aned, shveferes aned literally is the straw that goes into a pouch, which is the size of two etzbois that they could twirl around, they could revolve within this hole. So in other words, it's large enough that two fingers, the etzba and the middle finger, should be able to turn around in that hole. So if that hole is large enough, so the water in the keli, in the large keli, is mitzurev to the mikveh through that shveferes aned, and that water is considered mikveh, part of the mikveh, and therefore the tefillah is a good tefillah, and there's no problem. If it would be less than a shveferes aned, then it would be a problem, because then the water that's in the keli is not really mitzurev to the mikveh, and that water is in a keli, and the tefillah is not good. So by truma, you could go ahead, as long as the opening is kishveferes aned, you could go ahead and put small kelim into the large kelim, and memela be table the small kelim in the mikveh while they're in the large keli. That's b'negeya truma is concerned. Masha'inkein by kodshim, by kodesh, where you can't do that, and the reason is because we're choishish, maybe the hole won't be the size of kishveres aned. Nachamo. Yesh la'adam lahadbil kelim u'teich kelim l'truma. A person could be in toivel a keli in another keli. In other words, put the large keli in the mikveh, and the small keli is in the large keli while they're both in the mikveh, and that's fine. L'truma avalei l'kedesh. Why not? Because gzeira shema yeh pia keli tzar. We're concerned that maybe the opening of the keli will be narrow, and v'leyeh be kishveferes aned, and that opening won't be kishveferes aned. V'nimtza, so it'll come out that akelim shebeteiche kilu tovelu b'mayim shebekelim le b'mikveh. So it comes out that the water that's in the keli is not mitzurev to the mikveh. And memela by truma, we're not choishish. We say if it's kishveres aned, it's fine, and if it's not kishveres aned, it's not fine. Mashenkin by kodesh, we're choishish, and therefore the din is that even if it is kishveferes aned, it's still not fine, because we're afraid that maybe it won't be kishveferes aned. That's this din. So in other words, if the large keli is really a Tordik keli, so really this keli is not actually right now being nitbal, so the water that's coming into the keli is not really serving as a tefillah purpose, because lepel, that keli is Torah, so therefore that water is separated from the mikveh water, it's only connected through the opening, so therefore it's negeh, whether it's a shveferes aned or not. But if the large keli was tamei, so basically the large keli is being nitpal. If the large keli is being nitpal, so the water that's going into the large keli, even if the opening is a small opening, but that water is the mechuber to the mikveh, because that water is right now serving in order to be toivel the large keli. If the large keli was tamei, and therefore the water that's going into the large keli is obviously mikveh water, because it's serving right now to be matar this large keli, is miteich she'osel tefillah, since this water is being served to be toivelim, so memela that water is connected, obviously connected to the mikveh, so therefore also tefillah lekelim shebeteiche, so therefore the kelim shebeteiche are also tovel, and afilu lishtamish ben bekedesh is nachamos. So if you have an outside keli which is torah, there's no problem. If you have the outside keli which is tamei, so then you could certainly put in small kelim into the large keli and be table all of it together. However, if you have an outside keli which is toher, so if it's not kishveferes aned, so then obviously it's no good, even l'truma. Masha'inkin, if it's kishveferes aned, so then l'truma would be good and l'kedesh is not good. That's the first mila, that you can't use a keli which is even the opening of a shveferes aned if the keli is not. If it's not tamei, you can't use it in order to be table other kelim b'teiche for kedush. Halacha beis. Keli shenitmu acherev b'mashkin. We learned before that when you have a keli that was nitmu acherev b'mashkin, that the fact that mashke could be metame a keli, it's a chiddush. It's a din d'Rabbanan that mashke, which is a rishon, could be metame kelim. Now there's another din d'Rabbanan, that if this mashke touched the acheri akeli, and even acheri of akli cheres, is only the acheri gets tummy and the pnim doesn't get tummy. That's within that din. It's keli shenitma acheri b'mashkin. So the din is le nitma teiche. The teich of the keli didn't become tummy, and also beis etzba sheba'uvi svasei. Beis etzba means they had like an indentation to put the finger in. Vice is to hold the keli. So to hold the keli, instead of we have a handle, so they had an indentation to put the finger into the keli, and that's where you hold the keli. And that indentation was, let's see, on the rim of the keli or some part of the keli, which wasn't in the keli itself. So lei nit mateche, the teich of the keli didn't become tummy, and also v'lei beis etzba sheba'uvi svasei, and not on the base etzba, which is on the thickness of the rim. And it was on the top of the rim there was an indentation that also doesn't become tummy. V'hamashkin shebeteche esha bebeis tviyos. So obviously, if you have a keli and a cherav became tummy with mashkin, so the cherav is tummy, the inside of the keli is not tummy, and the mashke, which is in the inside of the keli or in the base tzviyasi, in that place where you put the finger in, is also tor and v'sheisabei. And you can go ahead and drink that water, even though the back of the keli is tummy. And then the yazru v'yitamu b'techa. You're drinking water from this keli. Now the back of this keli is tummy. L'chura, there's a concern that maybe the water that's in your mouth is going to touch the acheri akeli, and then if it touches the acheri akeli, it'll in turn go ahead and go back into the keli, and mainly be the keli. L'chura, there's a mokum for a concern that when you're drinking water from a keli that acherav is tamei, so that water that you're drinking will touch the acherav and then eventually go back into the pnim and be matami the pnim of the keli. Nochmal, the inside of that keli. As far as trum is concerned, we say that the inside of the keli is beseder, and the mashka which is inside the keli is beseder, also beseder. Aval the kedish, but we're dealing with kedish, is nitmu acherav, nitmu kulam. Once there's no musig of acherav being tummy and not the inside of the keli is being tummy, because there's always a concern that if the nitmu acherav, and then you're going to start drinking from the inside, so then the water that you're drinking or whatever, the mashka that you're drinking from the keli is going to touch the acherav, and then in turn will also touch the keli, and therefore will become tummy. So by kedish they were choishish, and by truma they weren't choishish. So that's the second mile. Second mile is b'legabi truma and legabi chulum we say nitmu acherav le nitmu teiche. Mashenka legabi kedish we say nitmu acherav is nitmu teiche. Halacha gimel. Hanoisis hamedras, someone that carries the medras, is mutar leilise ime truma keachod. He could at the same time be carrying truma. Hail ve'ein hanoisin negebe truma. Now a medras azov is metame b'mago b'masa. So Memela, when a person goes ahead and carries the medras azov, he becomes a rishon l'tumah. Now lepel, if he would be touching the truma, so obviously he would become he would be metame the truma. Masha'inkin, if he's not touching the truma, the fact that he's moving the truma doesn't make the truma tummy. So nachamo, he's carrying the medras azov, so he's becoming a rishon l'tumah, and he's also carrying truma at the same time. But carrying truma doesn't make truma tummy. The fact that a person is carrying truma doesn't make truma tummy. So Memela over here, this person that's being noisis azov, noisis hamedras, which is only a rishon l'tumah, is nachamal. Hanesis hamedras is mutar leilise ime truma keachod. He's at the same time allowed to carry truma. Hail ve'ein hanesi negebe truma. He's not touching the truma, and v'lei truma negaz b'medras, and the truma is not touching the medras azov, which is an avatuma. So therefore hareya tehera. So therefore the truma is torah. Avalei hakedesh, but lepel, a person that's carrying medras azov shouldn't be carrying kodesh. Afal pishalei nogabe, even though he's not touching the kodesh, and the kodesh is not touching the medras. But nevertheless, the chacham made a takana that he shouldn't carry it. Why not? There was such a story that someone was carrying a chavish kodesh, and v'tima b'medras shenasima, and lepel at the same time he was carrying a medras, and lepel this medras caused tumah to the chavish kodesh, and by Yisrael gazru shanesis hamedras le yisis hakedesh. They made such a takana. There was such a takala, so they made a takana that someone that's carrying a medrash shouldn't be carrying kedesh. And we have by Chazal that there are certain takanas. With takana there was a chash. There's a chash, something is going to happen. There's a musik of takanas that when there was a certain takala that happened, certain takala that had, like we had a sandal that has a masmir in it, or carrying afer of paraduma across a river, or across the Yarden. So there's a musik that a maisa happened, and there was a takala happened from it. So the Chacham instituted that you shouldn't do a similar maisa which had such a takala. So over here also, since there was a story that someone was carrying a chavishul kedesh, and he was also carrying the medras hazov, and lepel, the medras hazov was metami the chavishul kedesh. So therefore, they instituted shanesis hamedras le yises hakedesh, and v'legozra al b'medras hakedesh. The takana was only dafke tumas medras and dafke kedesh, because lechuri could be a different tumah that he's carrying together with kedesh, and also he could be metami the kedesh with a different tumah. V'legozra al b'medras hakedesh k'maisa shoya. And that takana was only that you shouldn't do it. However, vim over and also lepel, if he did carry it, is hail v'linaga b'kedesh ariya kedesh tor. So the takana wasn't that it should become tummy. The takana was only that you shouldn't carry it. But lepel, if you carried it, so it's not tummy. It's not tummy. So we have already 3 milas we learned about. The first 3 halachas. We've heard the halacha about being toivel a keli b'teich keli. Another mila was benegeh nitmo achere b'mashkin, so legabe kedesh is nitmo kule, and now we're learning another mila that you're not allowed to carry kodesh together with medras azov. Halacha dalet. Big day oichli truma, afal pishein tohirim v'nizhorim and Hatumos, but nevertheless are a big dayim medras lekedesh. Someone that eats truma and lepel is being nizer from any type of tumah. So his begodim have a din as if they're medras azov. They have a din of an avatuma legabi kedesh. Legabi kedesh, the Chacham instituted that a beged of a oichel truma, and he's be'emes toir, but nevertheless it should have a din as if he's azov, and his beged has a din of medras azov. That was the 4th takana. Halacha hey, the 5th takana. Keli shehu mefutzel v'luchesav v'kiresav mikusharis. You have a keli that's made up of different parts, and its luches, its boards, and its beams are all tied together. They're tied together. In other words, they're put together and they're tied together. So you have like a board going across as a bed, and you have the beams going across to hold the bed, and they're tied together. Is the im nitma, if it became tummy, and v'tzarech l'adbile l'truma, now you have to be toivelet because it became tummy, is yeshle l'adbile kule ke'echad k'shum mekusher. In that state of being all together and tied together, so that you could go ahead and be toivelet. You don't have to take it apart in order to be toivelet. Even though l'chure, when there's ropes over there could be a chatzitza. That's not considered chatzitza. That's part of the keli. It's all together. It's tied together. We're not worried, and therefore it's considered one thing, and you could be toivelet all together. That's le truma. But le kodesh, so the din is matter. You have to untie the ropes that are connecting the parts of the bread, and also anomenaga, you have to dry it inside to make sure that it's clean and there's no chatzitza there. Shem b'yeshem davar achetzitz, and only umat bil, only then do you go ahead and be toivelet, v'achar kach kosher, and then you could go ahead and tie it. So that was the 5th takana, the 5th mile rather of kodesh legabi truma, that a kelish umefutzel, the truma you could be toivelet as is, and the kodesh you have to take it apart, you have to untie it, take it apart, and dry it and clean it, make sure there's no chatzitza, and only then be toivelet, and then go ahead and tie it back. Halacha vov. Kelim hanigmorim b'tara. You finished off a keli, you made a keli, and it was finished b'tara. Afilo hoya oisa isan talmud chacham. And v'nizr ben, the person that made the keli was a talmud chacham, and he was nizr to make sure that it remained tor. Is arei elu tzrichim tefillah lekedesh. Before you go ahead and take a keli, which was just finished through a talmud chacham, you need tefillah lekedesh. Ve'ena tzrichim harav shemesh. So even though you have to be toivelet, but normally if you're toivelet, you're chesed that it's tummy, so l'chorah needs harav shemesh as well. So we say no. Ha'elu tzrichim tefillah lekedesh. They need tefillah, but ve'ena tzrichim harav shemesh. They don't need harav shemesh. That's b'negeya kodesh. Aval truma, as far as truma is concerned, is mishtamish ben b'lei tefillah. You could go ahead and use it without being tevelet. Sharei nasu betara. So in other words, again, you have a keli that was nigmar betara, it was done through a Talmud Chacham. The pashtas, there's no kshash, there's any tumah. So as far as truma is concerned, you can go ahead and use it. Mashiach, as far as kodesh is concerned, before you go ahead and use it, you have to go and be tevel it. Why did the Chacham institute that it needs tefillah l'kedesh? Because gzeira mishum reika ma'oret sheyiga b'em b'shas malacha v'adayin hulach. There's a concern. No, the pale, it's not makabel tumah. It's not makabel tumah until it becomes a keli. So l'chura, once it became a keli or nizr b'hem, so l'chura there's no kshash. So there's a kshash maybe while they were making the keli. So some spit from the amoretz fell onto the keli. Before it was nigmar, and now that it was nigmar, this roik is still wet, so it's still matame, and you don't notice it. And memela, so it's matame. So legabi kodesh, we're worried about akshash, even though it's a far kshash that the roik of the amoretz fell on this keli before it was nigmar, and if there was nigmar, it's still dry. It's still wet. But nevertheless, so taka letrumi not choishish, but lekodesh you choishish. And now the kshash is only that it's tzarich tefillah, but on the other end, it doesn't need herav shemesh. So that was the sixth takon. Halacha zayin. Now, achar shenigma hakeli, once the keli was finished, it's a finished keli, so there's a new din, mitzarif masha b'teichi l'kedesh avalei l'truma. As far as kedesh is concerned, it causes that everything that's in the keli should become one, but not for truma not. Now again, let's go. When a person touches, let's say, a piece of food, so that piece of food becomes tummy. So let's say if that person that touched him was a rishon, so the piece of food becomes a sheni. Now when that piece of food touches something else, so it can become a shlishi. If that shlishi touches something else, it becomes a revi. Now as by kodesh, the furthest it can reach is a revi. The furthest it can reach is a revi. By truma, the furthest it reaches is a shlishi. Now what happens if you have a number of apples, for example, in one bowl, you have a bunch of apples in one bowl, and you touch one of those apples, so since each apple is a separate apple, so that apple became tummy. Now that apple is touching another apple, so that apple becomes tummy. And as far as it goes, so by a truma, it will only go till becoming a shlishi. Masha'inkin by kodesh, l'chura, it will go till being a revi. That's the pashtus, one apple, another apple. But now the chiddush is that if you have a oichlim in one keli, so all those oichlim become kilo like it's one oichel. So when a person touches one of the pieces of food, it's as if all the pieces of food were one piece of food. Memela, he touched all of them. That's this chiddush b'negiyah kodesh. Nachamol. Halacha zayin. Achar shenigmar akeli. After the keli was finished already, you have a finished keli. Is mitzaref masha b'teicha l'kedesh. It causes that everything that's in it, as far as kodesh is concerned, should be considered one. Avalei l'truma, but not as far as truma is concerned. Ketzad. Keli shumole pedis prudim zamizah. You have a keli which is full of all fruit which are separated. Kein smukim. You have dried, in other words, raisins, dried grapes, or gregris and dried figs. V'noga tuma ba'achas mem. And Tumah touched one of these raisins or one of these figs. So the din is nitma kol masha bekeli l'kedesh. As far as kedesh is concerned, we look at it as if all the figs is one fig, or as far as all the raisins is one raisin, and everything became tummy. Avalei l'truma, but for truma we don't look at it as being one, and therefore only that raisin that you touched became tummy, and maybe the raisin next to it, whatever, until a shlishi. That's it. So that's this din. This is the seventh takana. Seventh takana is that the keli is mitzaref masha b'teicha l'kedesh. Now v'chol ha'mayla shel devreimi. All the 11 milas are all midrabon. But v'remez yesh l'mayla zu b'teira. In the teira there's a remez to this mila. This mila that the kodesh is mitzaref masha b'teicha, that it should be one thing, that there's a remez. What's the remez? Because it says kaf achas asara zov m'leik teiris. So the pasuk we learn with the question, why does it say the word achas kaf asara zov m'leik teiris? So we learn that Amr Chacham kol shemash b'kaf harei keguf echad. So that's the remez. The remez is that knows kaf, when there's a spoon, is achas. Everything that's in it, even though it's m'leik teiris, is all one. Is all one. Has a din of one. Then the Rambam continues, afilu she'en li teich. Even if it doesn't have a teich, the keli when it has a teich, so pshat, everything is in the receptacle of the keli. Now, filu she'en li teich, even if this receptacle has no teich, is also mitzaref masha olav lekedesh. You have a keli, and there's things on top of the keli, even though they're not in the keli, it also becomes Mitzurif again. Shahaya Tzivurim Al Gabi Haluach Al Gabi Ha'er. You have a board which is a keli, and on top of this luach, or on top of this piece of leather, you had piles of different pieces of food. Is aval pishein aperis negen zebazeh. The fruit aren't touching each other. You have two apples lying on one piece of leather, and they're not touching each other. Or on one board, you have one pile of kemach over here, one pile of kemach over here. So nevertheless, or one is over here, one is over here. So nevertheless, it's considered one, even though there's no tech. That's this thing. It's nachamol. So the halacha over here is the seventh takon, the seventh mile is that as far as kodesh is concerned, if things are in a keli, they become as one, and therefore when someone tummy touches it, or something tummy touches it, everything becomes tummy right away. It becomes, there's like one din tumah, like one thing became. And that din is even if ein leitech, and that's the remes of kaf achas asar azov meleik teres, that everything that's in it is achas. Halacha ches. Now this halacha is pratim in this halacha of halacha zayin. Now hoye shnei atzivurim b'teich hakeli, aber v'davar acher b'neim. You have two piles in one keli, and between the two piles there's something else which has nothing to do with the kodesh. It's not kodesh. And now v'nitma echad mishneim, and it became tami echad mishneim. So the question is, normally we say that we have two things of kodesh in one keli, so the two pieces of kodesh are one. But over here, Lepel, since you have something in between, so the chud of that thing in between is not one with the kodesh. Lepel, it's not one with the kodesh. So could the kodesh be one with each other when that thing that's in between is not one with the kodesh? So that's the shaila over here. Now, Nachamol, you have two piles in the keli. Of a davar acher b'neim, you have something in between them. And v'nitma echad mishneim, one of the two piles of kodesh became tummy. Is mhoya hadavar shebineim tzarich lekeli. If the thing that was in between them needed the keli, so therefore mitzarfon v'nitma kel. So since it's like bottled to the keli, this is also bottled to the keli. So it's not considered a hefsek because it needs the keli. It needs the keli. So therefore the keli is mitzar of them all and it becomes tummy. However, everything becomes tummy. But if this item that's in this keli is not really tzarech lekeli, it doesn't need the keli, it's there. But lepel, it doesn't need the keli to contain it. Even if there wouldn't be a keli, he would also stand where he is. The main tzarech lekeli is nachamol. You have two pieces of kodesh, and in between you have something which has nothing to do with it. It's a davar acher. Now the question is, so there's two options. Either that everything becomes tummy, side the two pieces of kodesh, plus this davar acher which is between them, or only the thing you touched became tummy. So if the thing that's between the two pieces of those, you have two pieces of kodesh, and in between you have the davar acher. So if that davar acher is tzarech lekeli, so mele like becomes bottled to the keli. So therefore nitma kol mashabeteche, all three of them become kila one thing, the kodesh and the kodesh plus the davar acher which is in between, and it's nitma kel. Masha'ein kain, if the thing that's in between is leit tzarech lekeli, so that causes a separation. It doesn't become part of it. And al derech the two pieces of kodesh don't become part of each other because it's separated by this davar acher, and therefore only that piece that you touched, that one piece that you touched, that becomes tummy. That's this din. Halacha tes. Now hoyu shnei tziburim b'keli. It's another again a din in this din of the keli mitzarfe. Hoyu shnei tziburim b'keli. You have two piles of food in a keli, and v'hatzibur echad mechuber l'mayim shacheri akeli. So again, you have mayim, which is acheri akeli, and you have a tzibur and two tziburim in the keli, and one of the tziburim is connected to the water, which is acheri akeli. So you have the acheri akeli is wet, and that wetness is going over from the back to the inside of the keli, and now you have one part of the keli which has a tzibur, and that tzibur is touching that wetness, that mayim, which is acheri akeli. And now there's also another part in the keli which has another tzibur. Now v'noga tomei b'tzibur hasheni, and the tummy touched in the other tzibur, the one that wasn't touching the mayim. So the din is nitmu shneim b'tzirif hakeli, and also v'nitmu hamayim shacheri hakeli machmezeh heichel hamechuber lem. Let's go again. You have a keli, and you have water on the back of the keli, which is mechuber. Let's say we'll say on the right of the keli, there's a tzibur of food, and then on the left of the keli you also have a tzibur of food. So again, you have the left of the keli, you have a tzibur of food, the right of the keli, you have a tzibur of food, and the tzibur on the right of the keli is mechuber to mayim, which is a chayre of the keli. Now someone went ahead and touched the food which is on the left of the keli. So we said before that since the kodesh is mitzaref kol ma shebetechi, so by touching the food which is on the left of the keli, the food that's on the left of the keli is mechuber to the food that's on the right of the keli, because they're kodesh and they're in a keli, so memela it's mechuber. So it's as if the whole left and right became tummy. Now once the left and the right became tummy, now the mashke which is on the back of the keli, which is mechuber to the food that's on the right, also becomes tummy, because lepel, by you touching the food on the left, you're also touching the food on the right, and by touching the food on the right, you're also touching the water which is b'acheria keli, which is connected to the food on the right. So mainly everything becomes tummy. That's l'chura pasha. That's the first din. Nochamol. One pile was mechuber to the water which was acheria keli, and v'noga tamei b'tzibur hasheni, and the tamei touched the tzibur hasheni, the one that wasn't mechuber to the water, is nit mushneim b'tziruf hakeli. So memela, by touching that one, we said the one on the left that wasn't mechuber, so memela the one on the right also becomes tummy, because they have a din of mitzurif nit mushneim. So both of the tziburim become tummy b'tziruf hakeli, and also the nit muamayim shacheri hakeli, and the water which is acheri hakeli also becomes tummy mach mezo echel mechuber lam, which is pashut. Afal pishein acheri hakeli, even though they're acheri hakeli, but lepel, since the acheri hakeli, which is mechuber to this tzibur, which is becoming tummy through the negia in the other tzibur, so mele everything becomes tummy. That's in this side. Now, what about noga hatami b'mayim shacheri hakeli? Over here is a little different. Over here, you didn't actually touch. You didn't touch the peiris. Because over there, when you touch the peiris, so you touch one tzibur of peiris as if you touch the other tzibur of peiris. Over here, you never touched the peiris. You touched the mayim, which was acheri hakeli. You touched the mayim, which was acheri hakeli. Noga hatami b'mayim shacheri hakeli. So that's pashut. That nitma ha'eichel ha'mechuber la. So the eichel, which is mechuber to that mayim, becomes tummy, because that's mechuber. So it's keilu, it became tummy. But hadover suffix, over here the suffix is in nitma ha'eichel ha'sheni b'tziruf hakeli, elei nitma machmas ha'tziruf. Do we say that lepel, the second pile of peiros also became tummy? That's the suffix. Over here again, you went ahead and touched the mayim shacheri hakeli. By touching the mayim shacheri hakeli, poshut, that the pile of which was touching that mayim became tummy. Why not? But the question is, good, they became tummy. But we're going to soon learn behamshech that if you have l'mashal a dover tummy and a dover tor in one keli, then the dover tor doesn't become tummy. The only time the two tziburim become one is when you touch one, so it's kilu, you touch them both. Like that's what we're going to learn behamshech. Whereas if you have let's learn halacha yud. Eichel kodesh and nitma. You have eichel kodesh that's tummy, and then v'hinichi b'keli, you put it into a keli, and then ubetecha keli, and in that keli is eichel kodesh acher tor. You have other eichel which is tor, and ve'ein negem b'zeh, and they're not touching each other. So over here is a tor b'tarasi. The tor remains tor. The answer is, when you're being metami them, they're mitzaref. When you touch one of them, it's as if you touch the other. Masha'inkin over here, one of them was already tummy, and now there's one that's tor, and the fact that they're sitting together doesn't connect them. So over here, bepashtus, that's l'chura the shaila at the end of halacha tes. Whereas over there, the pshat is when I touch the one on the left, the one that's not touching the water, so it's as if b'shas ma'isa, I'm touching the one on the right, and if I'm also touching the one on the right, it's pasha that the water which is connected to the one on the right becomes tummy. But over here, it's fakert, I touched the water which is on the outside. Now, when I touch the water that's on the outside, it's pashut that the tzibur which is on the right, which is connected to the water, became tummy. But I didn't touch that tzibur. I didn't touch that tzibur inside the keli. It became tummy. Now the question is it as if that I put a tummy dika tzibur into it, and now there's a Torah dika tzibur, and the Torah dika tzibur doesn't become tummy? Or we say no, lepeil, it became tummy while it was in the keli. It became tummy while it was in the keli by the fact that it's connected to the water which is outside the keli. So do we say that since it became tummy while it was in the keli by touching the water which is outside the keli, which is connected to it, it's as if you touched it in the keli, and memela, the other tzibur also became tummy. That's the yesed of the shaila. Now, botful yem. That's shaila number one. Now, botful yem. So the beginning of halacha yud is pasha that if you have something that's tummy and something that's tor, and they're both in the same keli, but it didn't become tummy in the keli, so memela the tummy b'tumasi v'ator b'tarasi. Now, what about botful yem v'naga be'echel tummy? So now the tful yem comes and he touches the eichel tummy. Now the truth of the matter is, this tummy is tummy whether or not he touches it or he doesn't touch it. But on the other hand, since we're saying that normally when you touch one, it's as if also you touch the other. So over here also, enochinami. If the tummy is here and the Torah is here, the Torah is not tummy. But now that he touched the tummy, so that touching the tummy is kilo like he also touched the Torah. So l'chura, the Torah should also become tummy. Or we say no. Bishlema, when you're touching the one, and through that, that's becoming tummy. So memela, that tummy extends also to the other. Then we say, Masha'ink, when you're touching one, and over there it's tummy already, so you're not really making it tummy. So you're not making it tummy, it's already tummy anyways. So memela was savim metumasi, nothing happened. So memela, the fact that you touched the tummy dika one is not going to really be metami the Torah dika one. That's the yisod of the shaila. But full yem. V'naga be'echel atami, he went and he touched the echel atami. Is yesh b'lav is there sofik. Im nifsa ator machmas magat full yem and b'nitzirif akili. Do we say that the Torah will also become tummy because lepel he touched him? He touched the other one, which mele is in turn keilu. He touched this one as well. Elei nifsal shalei nagat full yem el be'echel shesav min atoma. So since the full yem touched eichel, which was already satiated with tumah. So he didn't add anything to the tumah. So since he didn't add anything to the tumah, so mele it's not considered that he touched the other one to be metamet. That's the suffix. So we hear Nachamal. So basically, from halacha zayin to halacha yud is like one inyan. We're talking about this seventh mila. The mila is that it's metame, that everything that's in the keli or even on top of the keli, if we're talking about a keli, it has no teich. So it's mitzar of everything lekodesh, but not letruma. And then we have dinim b'negea if you have something which is, first of all, we had a din poshut, that if you have two objects, and there's something else in between the two objects, so depending on whether that third thing is tzarech lekeli, so then it's mitzaref kol ma shebeteche, and if it's ain't tzarech lekeli, it's not mitzaref kol ma shebeteche. Then we had this din b'negea if you have shnei tziburim, and then one of the tziburim is mechuber la'acherav b'mayim. And over there was also, it was clear, if you go ahead and touch the part that's not mechuber l'mayim, so everything becomes tummy. Masha'inkin, if you touch the mayim, and through that, the tzibur, which is mechuber l'mayim, becomes tummy, so there was a suffix, whether or not the other tzibur also becomes tummy. That was one suffix. And then there was another suffix, whether or not, in a case where, now it's a pashta zayah that if you just have something that's kodesh, that's tummy, and something that's tor, and they're both in one keli, so atami b'tumasi v'ator b'tarasi. The question is, if someone that's a tvul yem will go ahead and touch the tummy, will that cause the tor should become tummy? Or we say no, that since the tummy was already tummy, so it was already savim b'tumasi, so the fact that the tvul yem touched the tummy is irrelevant. Halacha yudalef. Haravi b'kedesh, this is the eighth, this is already the eighth mila, haravi b'kedesh, pasul. Havel betrumator, that's what we learned Kamapam, that by Kodesh it goes up till the Revi, Mashenka by Truma, it's only till the Shlishi. V'chein, ha-shlishi shebetruma, im noga b'mashka Kodesh, harei ze nitma, k'meshe b'yarnu. A Shlishi of Truma would make Mashka Kodesh into a Rishon. Aber v'ashlishi shebetruma ishe b'Kodesh, im noga b'mashka Truma is lei posli. If you have a Shlishi of Truma, or a Shlishi of Kodesh for that matter, and it's going to go ahead and touch Truma, it doesn't do anything, even if it's Mashka Truma. Masha'ink in a Shlishi of Truma, if it'll touch Oichel Kodesh, it'll make it a Revi. If it'll touch Mashka Kodesh, it'll make it into a Rishon. Halacha Yud Beis. This is the ninth mile. Mi shenitmas yodi achas, someone that one of his hands became tummy, tumas yodayim, and v'noga ba b'yodi shniya b'yad chaveri. And he went ahead and touched with this hand that became tummy, he touched the other hand, or someone else's hand. So the din is pasels hashniya, he pasels the shniya. B'harei keshlishi, it has a din of a shlishi l'tumah. Mela, that hand could pasel kedesh. That's the chiddush. Normally, yadayim becomes shniyas, But over here, this Yodayim that became Tommy from Yodayim, it's Yodayim that became Tommy from Yodayim, so it has a din of a Shlishi, and this Shlishi could pass L'Kedesh. And Vimhois, that's talking about if it was dry. Vimhois Yodi Blula Bashaman, if the Tommy b'mashke, if the Tommy the hand was Blula b'mashken, is Afal Pishalei Noga, even if he didn't touch the other hand. So the din is not Nitmas Chaverta, so both hands become Tommy, and Vitzorech Lahatbu L'Shneim, and he has to be table both of them, and Vachar Kachika b'Kedesh. And only then could he touch Kedesh. So that's the din by Kedesh. By Kedesh, the din is that first of all, a yad, which is Tommy, could be Matami, another yad, which is Neguva, that's din number one, and that yad will become possible to be, he'll have a din of a shlishi, Memele he won't be able to touch Kedesh, because he'll passel Kedesh, and if the yad, which is Tomei, is wet, so even if he didn't touch the other hand, so the other hand becomes Tomei, and he needs tefillah, because by Kedesh, L'Kedesh, the Tilas Yadayim of Kedesh, no Tilas Yadayim, by Kedesh, it's always you need tefillah, V'tzorech, Lahat, B'lishteim, and only V'achar Kach Yivgar Kedesh. Now this whole din is B'negei Kedesh. Aval B'truma, but as far as Truma is concerned, Im Nitmas Yodi Achas, if one hand became Tomei, is Lei Nitmas Chaverta, the other Chaver doesn't become Tomei, V'afilu Noga B'kshin Nuguva, if he touches it while it's dry, and there's one hand which is Tomei, touches the other hand, the wall, they're both dry, so then it's not Tomei. And that's the number one. And also that a hand that became tummy l'truma doesn't need tefillah. It's enough to have netila. El noitlev and negeh betruma. Noitlev and negeh betruma. So you don't need tefillah. You need netilas. Nachamal is by hegdish. There's a din is that a yodi achas could be metame the yodi shnia, and then when it is metame the yodi shnia, so it needs tefillah. Masha'enken, it has a din of a shlishi. Masha'enken gabe truma, there's no such a din that a yodi achas is not metame yodi shnia. It's not metame yodi shnia. If they're neguva, if there's wetness, so the yadayim makes mashke into a rishon, and once it becomes a rishon, so obviously, so the second hand is going to become tummy because the second hand touched the rishon l'tumah. But we're talking about when it's dry, so there's no rishon over here involved. So a yad can't be matame another yad when it's neguva, and also a yad which is tummy. The yad which is tummy that it needs netila, but it doesn't need tefillah. Halacha Yud Gimel. Oichlin neguvim shalei hochshiru. If you have dry food which never was makabel tuma, and they were never muksha. Never muksha makabel tuma. We learned that in order for oichel to be makabel tuma, it had to be that it was fell on it one of the zayin mashkin. And over here, when you have dry oichlin which was never hochshiru, so the din is oichlin oisam b'yadayim misuavis. You have yadayim misuavis, which means yadayim which are a sheni l'tuma, which need netilas yadayim. But nevertheless, so then matame, they could be matame oichel, but nevertheless, but truma rather, they could be matame truma because they're shneis. But on the other hand, since they're lei huchshiru l'kabel tuma, so therefore they're not makabel tuma. B'med dvarim amurim b'truma. Avol b'kedesh, when we're talking about kedesh, is chibas hakedesh machshirosim. So the chibas hakedesh makes it as if they were already mukshir, and therefore va'aser l'misha yodav tmeis lechel kedesh lei huchshir. A person that's Yodav is Tmeis is not allowed to touch Oichel, he's not allowed to eat Oichel even if it's Lehuchsher. And not only he's not allowed to eat it, in other words, to touch it and to eat it, Vafilu le'naga be'ela bekush, knows he didn't actually touch it, he touched it with a stick. Eshetachel le'chaveirel techpiv, hareza oser. He's not allowed to eat Kodesh if he has Yodayim Neguves, if he has Yodayim Tmeis, even if he doesn't touch it. Ain't tzarech lemer, shem naga, tuma be'echlin shel kedesh lehuchshiru shenitamu shemitmu mipnei shechibas hakedesh machshirosim. He knows if he touches either something tummy touches kedesh which lehuchshiru, where he touches with yadayim misuavis, so he's actually taking yadayim misuavis and touching it. So the din is bekitzer. Hegdish doesn't need hechsher. Kedesh doesn't need hechsher. Chibas hakedesh machshirosim. That's this din. That kedesh becomes tummy even without hechsher. That's din number one, and also we're learning that even if you don't touch it, just to eat it, while you have your daim misuavis and someone puts it in your mouth, that's also aser b'kedesh. Masha'enki by truma, you could actually pick it up. You could pick it up and eat it by your daim misuavis, as long as it's lehuch shiru, because lepeil is not makabel tuma. Now, by medvar mamurim, when we say that eklin neguvim shel lehuch shiru has a din that they're mekabel tumah, lifsel eichel atzmei l'asr b'achila. In other words, if something tamei touches eichel shalei huksheru, so it becomes asr b'achila. Avalimnis beirishon v'sheni. But to go ahead and say whether what happens if this eichel is going to touch something else? If this eichel is going to go ahead and touch something else, could this eichel be matame another eichel? Is a suffix. That's already a suffix. Whether eichel that was mekabel tumah when it was lei huksheru could go ahead and be matame something else. Kesad noga eichel shenitma b'lei hechsher, but eichel sheni shehuksher. If eichel that was nitma b'lei hechsher went ahead and touched eichel which was huksher, is a sheni suffix. Because since the rishon lehuksher, so ein achinami is mekabel tumah legabi that it should be possible. But the shail is if it's mekabel tumah that it should be able to passel something else. Halacha tezvav. Ha'oinen is someone that was an oval on one of the zayin craven that you mechuyev to be misabel. Is achar shes tam zman aninus. While he's an oinen, he's not allowed to eat kachim. He's not allowed to eat kachim. He's not allowed to eat even meiser sheni. He's not allowed to eat kachim. But an oinen is allowed to eat truma. An oinen is allowed to eat truma, but he's not allowed to eat kachim. Now he's not really tummy. He's not really tummy. An oinen is not tummy. But nevertheless, the din is a oinen achar shes shetam zman aninus. And also a mechusi kippurim. A mechusi kippurim means someone that was toivel, and he already had head of shemesh, but now he has to bring a carbon, because he has the carbon, the zov, the zava, the yeledes, and the mitzvah. They all have to bring korbanis in order to be able to eat kachim. So now they were in a matzav where they weren't allowed to eat kachim. They weren't tummy really, because they already had tefillah and head of shemesh, but they were in a matzav that they weren't eat kachim. So the din is a oinen acher shes tam zman aninusei. And also a mechusi kippurim achar shahevi kaparase is sorech tefillah lachilas kedesh. In order to eat kedesh, now this is also a din derabanan, he needs tefillah lachilas kedesh, because since he was in a matzav that he was mesir das from eating kedesh, so memele he wasn't like nizer b'negei tumah b'negei achilas kedesh, so therefore he needs tefillah lachilas kedesh. Avalei letruma, he doesn't need any tefillah letruma. Why not? So the Ram explains that be'atzim l'chura there would be an art for truma as well. Avalei letruma kosho einen mechusi kippurim mutarim lechles hatruma. An einen mechusi kippurim is mutarim lechles hatruma. So memele he wouldn't need tefillah for truma. Mipnima etzrichum tefillah lekedesh. What's the problem? L'chura he's tar. Shariad ato hayasurim lechles hakedesh. And v'sichodaitim, and there was esach hadas v'shem nitmu and v'hem lo yodu. So memele that's why there was a takana that an einen and a mechusik kippurim shouldn't eat kodesh until he's tevel. And they could touch the kachim after without tefillah. Masha'enkein b'negei achila, they're not allowed to eat kachim until the first table. That's the din of an oinen and mechusik kippurim. Now the emphasis is that a tefil yem also is not allowed to eat truma. So there was a person who was tevel, and then he became a tefil yem, and now he waits till Erev Shemesh. And the din is, even though there was a matzah that he wasn't allowed to eat truma, but nevertheless, after Erev Shemesh, he doesn't have to be tevel. So the question is, if you tell me that the reason why he doesn't have to be tevel after Oinen and Mechusi Kippurim is because he was mutter betruma, so it means be'atzim a person that was in a matzah that was also betruma, l'chura there's a mokim to say that he has to be tevel betruma. So the question is, so if that's the case, so why doesn't he have to be tevel after Erev Shemesh? Because there was in a matzah from the tefillah until the Erev Shemesh that he wasn't. He was mutter, he was also betruma. So on that, bring down that the pshat is azay, because first of all, by Erev Shemesh, he was toivel. He already did a maisa in order to be matayr himself for this inyan. Masha'enkim by mechusi kippurim, there was no maisa for tara b'negei mechusi kippurim. And al derav zeh, also over here, it's going to happen by itself. It's going to happen by itself. In other words, the Erev Shemesh is going to happen by itself. So I'll call upon him. So there's no such of a hesach hadas. That's not called a hesach hadas. Call upon. The din is certainly like that a tefil yem, he's tevel, and then he's a matzah where he's not allowed to eat truma, and when it comes out of Shemesh, he's allowed to eat truma, even though he's not tevel. Masha'enken and mechusi kippurim, or al derech zeh an oinen, so he's in a matzah where he's not allowed to eat kachim, so before he eats kachim, he has to go ahead and be tevel to eat kachim. Halacha tezayin. Now sheish milas or rishenis, the first six milas that was mentioned is awesome, so those milas are bein lekedesh, and bein lechulim shenasu al taras hakedesh. There's a musik called chulin which you're doing with the chumras of kedesh. So those chulin which you're doing al taras hakedesh also have to be done with all sheish milos. However, the chamish achrein is the last five sheheim min hakeli mitzaref masha b'teichi v'hala. the last five, which is from Halacha Zayin Estes, which are from the Keli Mitzaref Mashabatechi V'Hala, all these dinim only are Osum B'Kedesh B'Lvad. They only apply to Kedesh. Avolei B'Chul Shnasu Al Taras HaKedesh, they don't apply. They weren't instituted for Chul Shnasu Al Taras HaKedesh. Elaharei Hein B'Chamish Elu Kichulin. As far as these 5 milas are concerned, so Chul and Shnas Al Teres HaKedesh, you could deal with them like you deal with Chul. Leficha Chul and Shnas Al Teres HaKedesh is a Rishon Tomi Ben, V'Hasheni Posel, V'Hashlishi Tor Kichul, Kimei Shebiyan. So the Shlishi is Tor, and this din, which we learned already, that if it was Nas Al Teres Truma, there is a Musig of a Shlishi. Mashayin can some there was Nas Al Taras HaKedesh. There's certainly not a musig of a Revi, but there's not even a musig of a Shlishi. There's only a musig of a Rishon and a Sheni. So even though it's Nas Al Taras HaKedesh, which means you have to have all the chumras of Kedesh, which is part of those chumras are the Sheish Milas or Rishenas. So they're taka being instituted all the Sheish Milas or Rishenas. But this Mila that there's a musig called a Revi doesn't apply, and even that there's no musig of Shlishi. The Chul Shnas Al Taras HaKedesh, there's no musig of a Shlishi.